There is a small town in northern Pakistan called Chitrali, tucked between mountains so tall they seem to hold up the sky. The people there live quietly. They wake with the morning prayers. They farm their wheat, they marry their daughters young. And they keep their secrets buried deep like roots under stone. Sara was born in Chitrali. She was 24 years old with dark hair that fell to her shoulders in soft waves. Brown eyes that seemed to be always looking for something just past the horizon. And a laugh that her mother said could embarrass the whole neighborhood. She taught school to young girls in the mornings and spent her afternoons reading novels. She kept hidden under her mattress because her father believed books gave women strange ideas. Sara had plenty of strange ideas already, she had felt. Different for as long as she could remember. Not sick, not broken, just different. She noticed the way sunlight looked on a woman's face. She noticed the way certain women walked, the way they spoke, the curve of their hands when they held a cup of tea. She noticed, and then she told herself she was not noticing. And then she went to sleep and dreamed anyway. She'd never told anyone. In Chitrali. You did not tell anyone. Her mother had started talking about marriage proposals the moment Sara turned 22. There was the son of the mill owner. There was a cousin in Lahore. There was a respectable man from Peshawar who needed a second wife, which her father dismissed. But her mother had nodded thoughtfully in a way that made Sara's blood go cold. Sara smiled through all of it. She poured tea for the guests. She said, "Gee, Amy, whatever you think is best." She went back to her room and pressed her forehead against the cold window glass and breathed. She was not unhappy, exactly. She was not falling apart. She was simply waiting, though she did not know what she was waiting for. And she had learned somewhere in her 24 years not to look at that question too directly. Then Alia came. Alia arrived in Chitrali on a Thursday in October, with 2 large suitcases, a camera bag slung over one shoulder, and the kind of confidence that makes people in small towns immediately suspicious. She was 27, the daughter of a Lahore family distantly related to the Khanums who lived 3 houses down from Sara's family. She had come according to the story that spread through the neighborhood in under 48 hours to spend 3 months documenting the yoba, traditional embroidery and craft work of Chitrali women, for an NGO project in Islamabad. Sara heard about her before she saw her. "She wears trousers," said Sara's neighbor Razia Auntie, with the tone of someone reporting a natural disaster. "She's not married," said someone else. 27 and not married. Hi. "She smokes," whispered Razia Auntie, leaning closer. "I saw her. On the road. In daylight." Sara listened and said nothing and thought, "I want to meet her." She met her 2 days later, at the Khanum house where Alia was being hosted while she settled into her project. Sara had been invited for tea, not to meet the guest officially. But everyone understood that the tea was entirely about the guest. She walked into the sitting room and there was Alia, perched on the edge of a cushioned chair with a small notebook in her lap, talking with old Khanum Saab about the age of a particular embroidery pattern. She had her hair pulled back loosely, escaping in small pieces around her face. She wore a dark blue kameez and yes, trousers, the kind that tapered at the ankle. Her hands moved as she talked. There was a small silver ring on her right hand. She looked up when Sara walked in, and their eyes met. Sara felt something she did not have words for. It was not just attraction, though there was that, immediate and unmistakable as a sound in the dark. It was more like recognition. Like meeting someone you have somehow already spoken to in some quiet part of yourself. Alia smiled. It was an open, easy smile with nothing complicated in it, at least not yet. "Assalamu alaikum," she said. "Walaikum assalam," Sara said, and sat down and tried to remember how to be a normal person. The tea lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, Sara knew that Alia had grown up in Lahore's Gulberg neighborhood, that she had studied fine arts in Lahore and then documentary photography in Istanbul on a scholarship, that she had spent 6 months in Morocco the year before, that her favorite food was nahari from a specific restaurant on Liberty Market, that she had one younger brother who was the family's actual pride and one older sister, who had married well and taken up the full-time occupation of reminding everyone about it. Alia knew that Sara taught school, that she had studied B.Ed in Peshawar, that she liked to read, that she had 3 younger siblings, and that she made very good ginger chai. She knew because Sara had made the tea herself and brought it in. And Alia had taken a sip and closed her eyes for a moment in a way that was, frankly, unfair. "This is the best chai I've had since I left Lahore," Alia said. "You're just being polite," Sara said. "I am never polite about chai. It's the one thing I'm completely honest about." Sara laughed a real laugh. The embarrassing one her mother warned her about, and Alia looked at her with something warm and pleased in her eyes. As if the laugh was a gift she had not expected. Walking home in the early evening, the mountains going purple gold against the sky. Sara thought, "I am in trouble." She thought it lightly. The way you think something when you don't yet know. How true it is. Alia's work required her to spend time in the homes of women who did the traditional embroidery. And through the Khanum connection and Sara's family standing in the community, it was arranged that Sara would accompany her as a kind of informal guide and translator for the older women who spoke more Khawar than Urdu. Sara's mother approved of this arrangement because it seemed respectable and useful. Sara's father was indifferent. Sara herself agreed so quickly that she then had to stand in her kitchen for a few minutes and have a serious internal conversation about composure. They fell into a routine, almost immediately. Every morning Sara would walk to the Khanum house after her school day ended, which was around noon. Alia would be ready with her camera bag and notebook. They would walk together to whichever home Alia was documenting that day. Sara translating and Alia photographing, and both of them doing the intricate social work of making old women comfortable enough to talk freely and show their work without reservation. Alia was extraordinary at this. Sara had expected someone from the city educated abroad, sophisticated to struggle with the rhythm of these homes, the extended silences, the indirectness. The way important things were never said plainly but always wrapped in 3 layers of ordinary conversation first. But Alia moved through it all with a patience and attention that surprised Sara completely. She sat on the floor when sitting on the floor was the right thing. She accepted food when food was offered even when she wasn't hungry. She admired children without false brightness. She asked about embroidery patterns with genuine curiosity. Where did this color combination come from? Did this particular knot have a name? Was this pattern taught mother to daughter, or was it something you invented yourself? The old women loved her. Sara noticed things. She noticed that Alia always poured Sara's chai first before her own. She noticed that when they walked, Alia matched her pace to Sara's without seeming to think about it. She noticed the way Alia listened completely, without the part of her attention elsewhere that most people bring to listening, as if whatever Sara was saying was the only thing happening in the world. She noticed. And she felt like warmth. One afternoon in the 3rd week, they sat in the courtyard of old Bibi Zainab's house, waiting while Bibi Zainab went to find a particular piece of work she wanted to show Alia. The courtyard had a small pomegranate tree in the corner, going autumn red, and the light was coming in low and gold. "Can I ask you something?" Alia said. She was turning her camera lens over in her hands, the way Sara had noticed she did when she was thinking. "Yes," Sara said. "What do you want?" "For your life." "Not your family's answer, yours." Sara looked at the pomegranate tree. She was quiet for a moment. "That's a very direct question," she said. "I know." "You don't have to answer. No, it's all right." She thought about it honestly, which was something she rarely allowed herself to do. "I want to keep reading. I want to travel somewhere, even just Karachi, even just Islamabad, just somewhere different. I want to do something that matters. My teaching matters, I think. But I don't know." She stopped. "It feels silly. It doesn't. I want to feel like my life is mine." She said it quietly, almost to herself. Like I'm living it, not just performing it. Alia was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I understand that exactly." Sara looked at her. "Do you feel that way?" "I did. For a long time." Alia set the camera lens down. "I left and that helped. But leaving isn't available to everyone. And it doesn't fix everything even when you do. What fixed it for you?" Alia considered. "Deciding that I was real. That my experience was real. That I got to want things and those wants were legitimate. Not shameful. Not a phase, real." She said it simply, without any heavy meaning. But Sara heard the weight of it anyway. She heard the word phase. She heard the word shameful. She understood, suddenly and completely. That Alia was not only talking about photography and travel. Sara's heart beat in a strange, slow, significant way. She said nothing. But something shifted between them, something quiet and enormous, like a tectonic plate moving a single inch. In the fourth week, it rained, not the gentle autumn drizzle Sara was used to, but a proper mountain rainstorm that came down hard and serious. And they were caught in it walking back from Baby Zainab's house. And they actually ran, laughing, Alia holding her camera bag over her head. Sara's dupatta flying and ducked into the doorway of a closed shop and stood there, breathing hard, completely soaked. Laughing at nothing and everything. They were very close together in the narrow doorway. The rain made everything smell like wet stone and fresh earth. Alia pushed her wet hair back from her face and looked at Sara, and Sara looked at her. And neither of them said anything for a moment. That stretched and stretched. "You look like you jumped in a river," Alia said. "You look like you lost a fight with a cloud," Sara said. They laughed again. But it was softer this time. The closeness didn't resolve. Sara was aware of every inch of the small space between them, the warmth of it, the possibility of it. She looked away first. She had to. "It'll stop soon," she said. "The rain?" "Yes," Alia said. She was still looking at Sara. "It will." Sara began to spend a portion of every evening accounting for what she felt. She did this with the rigor of a scientist and the helplessness of someone who already knew the experiment's results. She felt happy when she knew she was going to see Alia that day. She felt the particular sharp disappointment of something rarer when she didn't. She thought about things she wanted to tell Alia, an interesting sentence in a book. Something funny a student did. A question she'd had about the world, and she thought about them in the voice of a conversation already taking place. She thought about her hands. She thought about her laugh. She thought about the small silver ring and whether it had a history. She had felt attraction before, distantly, theoretically, always immediately buried. But not like this. This was not abstract. This was specific and insistent and very much about a particular person who poured her chai. First and matched her pace and said the word. Real like she meant it. She did not let herself think about what it meant in practical terms. She knew what it meant in practical terms. It meant nothing could happen. It meant she would feel this and carry it quietly, and eventually Alia would leave and Sara would stay, and some man from Peshawar or Lahore or down the road would come and she would perform her life, and that would be that dot she knew. This dot she did not think about it, what she did. Not know what she could not see was that Alia was doing her own accounting. Alia had been in relationships before. She was not in one now. She had loved a woman in Istanbul, a Turkish photographer named Deepening, with ink-stained fingers and a laugh like a car engine, and it had been real and full and ultimately impossible in the particular way of loves that are perfect in one time zone and entirely impossible to export. They had been careful. They had been together for 2 years and no one in there. Families had known, and then Deepening had gotten an opportunity in New York, and Alia had an opportunity in Lahore, and they had sat on Deepening's apartment floor and cried and let go. Since then Alia had worked. She had thrown herself into projects. She had been lonely in the specific way of people who know what they want and can't have it. And she had made peace with that loneliness the way you make peace with a difficult neighbor imperfectly. On a day-to-day basis. She had not expected. Sara. She had not expected those eyes that were always looking for something past the horizon. She had not expected that laugh. She had not expected the sharp intelligence barely contained in the careful politeness, the hunger for something more visible every time they talked about books or travel or the way the world was organized. She had not expected to feel so immediately and profoundly understood. Alia was 27 and she knew herself well enough to know what was happening. She was also practical. She understood where she was. She understood what Sara's life contained: the family, the expectation, the marriage conversations Sara mentioned once very briefly and then did not mention again, but which Alia heard clearly. She was here for 3 months. She had her project, and then she had Islamabad, and then she had the next thing. Always the next thing. She tried to be responsible about it. She mostly failed. One evening in the 5th week, Sara stayed late at the Khanum house, helping Alia organize the photographs she'd taken so far, sorting them, labeling them by household and craftsperson, noting the details Alia dictated about technique and pattern origin. It was a simple, practical task and they worked side by side at the table. And at some point, Sara looked up and found Alia looking at a photograph of an old woman's hands. Her face gone very still and soft. "What are you thinking?" Sara asked. "That these hands have made 10,000 hours of beauty," Alia said. "And almost nobody outside this valley will ever see it. The project will show it. An NGO report that 12 people will read and file." She said it without bitterness, just tiredness. "I sometimes think about all the beauty that just disappears. All the things made and used and worn out and gone, with no record. That's very sad." "It is," she paused. "But maybe that's also just how things are. Things happen and then they're over and they don't leave a record and they were still real. They still mattered." She said it looking at the photograph, but Sara felt it land elsewhere. "Yes," Sara said carefully. "They were still real." Alia looked at her then. The lamp was low between them. The house was quiet. "Sara," Alia said. Just her name. Nothing else. And Sara's heart came completely undone. She looked down at the photographs. "It's getting late," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of it. "I should go." "Yes," Alia said. "Of course." Sara walked home in the dark and stood in her room and pressed her hand flat against her sternum as if she could contain what was happening inside it. She thought, "What do I do with this?" She had no answer. She had never needed one before. The Cannons had a small walled garden behind the house, not much. Just a patch of ground with 2 apple trees and some winter vegetables coming up. And a stone bench under the trees where old Canon Saab liked to sit in the mornings. On a Saturday in the 6th week, Alia was sitting there in the afternoon with a book she wasn't reading. And Sara came through the back gate the way she sometimes did when the front of the house was too busy with neighborhood visitors. And she found her there. "Sit with me?" Alia said. Sara sat. The autumn afternoon was cool and still, the kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. They sat for a while without talking. This was one of the things about them that Sara treasured without knowing she was treasuring it. They could sit in silence and it was full rather than empty, warm rather than awkward. Most silences Sara had experienced were demands in disguise. This one was just a shared space. "Tell me about something you love," Alia said eventually. "Something you never talk about." Sara thought. "Poetry," she said. "Urdu poetry, Faze. I know that sounds common. There's nothing common about loving Faze. I don't just mean appreciating him. I mean, he says things I feel that I didn't know I felt. He says things about longing and distance," and she stopped. "The kind of love that can't be spoken plainly. He wrote a lot about that." A pause. "Yes," Alia said quietly. "He did. What do you love?" Sara asked. "That you never talk about." Alia was quiet for a moment. "Istanbul," she said. "I miss it every day. I was happy there in a way I've never been anywhere else." A pause. "And I miss someone who was part of that. Someone I cared about very much. What happened? Geography. And family. And all the ordinary walls that stop things from being what they could be." She turned her face up toward the apple trees. She was a photographer. She saw beauty in everything. She taught me that the camera isn't just a machine, it's a way of saying, "This matters, I'm paying attention. This is real." Sara heard it. She felt the word enter her chest like a stone dropped in water. She did not react. She kept her face still with an effort that cost her something. "She sounds wonderful," Sara said. She was. Alia looked at her now directly. There was something careful and open in her eyes, an honesty that offered without demanding. "I hope she's happy in New York." Sara breathed. Do you think about?" She stopped. Started again. "Do you think you'll find that again? Someday?" Alia looked at her for a long moment. In that moment, Sara felt entirely transparent. She felt as if Alia could see everything she was thinking. Every feeling she had been carefully folding into the smallest possible shape and tucking away felt seen with a thoroughness that was terrifying and, underneath the terror, unspeakably relieving. "I'm not sure I'm looking for it," Alia said finally. "I'm not sure that's..." She stopped. "Some things are not about finding. They're just about being present where you are. Paying attention." Sara understood this. She understood it the way she understood phase, not as an intellectual matter, but as a physical one. A thing felt in the body. Yes, she said. They sat in the garden until the cold drove them inside. The weeks moved. Sara began to understand that there is a kind of intimacy that does not require declaration. It builds in small things, in the way a person remembers what you said 3 weeks ago and asks about it. In the way they notice when you're tired or worried without being told. In the way silence between two people becomes a language of its own. She and Alia had this. It had grown up between them like a plant that nobody planted, nobody chose it, nobody tended it deliberately. And yet there it was, rooted and real. They talked about books. They disagreed about Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Sara found him overrated. Alia was outraged. They talked about the girls. Sara taught about which ones were brilliant and held back by the assumption that brilliance in women is somehow inconvenient. About what education does and doesn't do for girls in places like Chitrali. They talked about photography and what it meant to witness something versus what it meant to change it. They talked about faith, carefully, the way you talk about something that matters too much to be careless with. They talked about the mountains, which they both loved Sara because she had grown up inside them and knew their moods. Alia because she had grown up without them and still felt their size as a kind of awe. They talked about everything except the thing neither of them said. Sara had known women in novels who carried secret loves. She'd always found them somewhat pitiable, all that restraint, all that waste, all that life spent on the wrong side of a door. She thought, I understand now. It is not weakness. It is math. The cost of speaking is too high. So you learn to live in the space adjacent to the truth, close enough to feel its warmth. Careful never to touch it. She told herself she was content with this. On good days. She almost believed it. Alia was less successful at mathematics. In the 7th week she did something she had not entirely planned. They were at Bibi Zainab's house again, finishing the last of the documentation work there. And Bibi Zainab, who was 90 years old and had survived things that would break most people and thus felt entirely free to say whatever she liked, looked at Sara and Alia sitting side by side over a piece of embroidery work and said in Khawar, "You two are like one person split into 2 bodies." Sara translated this after a moment's hesitation. Because to not translate it would have been conspicuous. Alia was quiet for a moment. Then she said in Urdu, "Tell her I think she's right." Sara looked at her. Alia was looking at the embroidery work. Not at Sara, but there was color in her face. Sara translated. Bibi Zainab laughed a short, sharp, knowing laugh and went back to her work, walking home that afternoon. Sara said, "You didn't have to say that." "I know," Alia said. "It doesn't." Sara stopped. She tried to find words that were honest without being the words. "Nothing can." "I know," Alia said again. Her voice was gentle. Not pushing. Not asking for anything. "I know." They walked in silence for a while. The mountains were very clear in the cold air, every ridge sharp against the sky. "I just wanted it to be said," Alia said quietly. "Just once." Even indirectly. Sara pressed her lips together. She felt the sting of something that was not quite sadness and not quite joy, something that lives in the country between the two. "I heard it," she said. "Just that." Not more. Alia nodded and they walked, and neither of them spoke again until they reached Sara's street. In the 8th week. There was a wedding in the neighborhood, a second cousin of the Khanums, celebrated with the full 3-day production that Chitrali weddings required. Alia was invited as part of the Khanum household. Sara and her family were invited in their own right. The women's celebration was held in a large tent in the courtyard, strung with lights, full of music and women dancing, the kind of dancing that only happens in women-only spaces. Free and joyful and without performance for anyone's benefit except their own. Sara danced with her cousins and her mother and her younger sisters. She wore a dress her mother had picked, dark green with gold embroidery at the cuffs and collar. And she had her hair braided back with a gold clip. And by her own accounting, she looked better than she usually gave herself credit for. She saw Alia cross the courtyard, standing near the edge of the dancing with some of the Khanum women, and Alia saw her at the same moment. Alia was wearing a deep red with fine silver work, her hair loose. And she was beautiful, Sara thought. With the helplessness of a person who has given up arguing with an obvious fact, Alia raised her chai cup slightly. A small salute from across the noise and light. Sara smiled back. Later, they found themselves sitting together near the side of the tent, away from the main crowd, sharing a plate of mithai someone had pressed on them. The music was loud enough that they had to lean close to hear each other. Do you like weddings? Alia asked. I like the dancing, Sara said. I could do without everything else. The expectation machine. Exactly. Every wedding is also a reminder that you're not yet married. And isn't that a shame, and have you considered this particular option we've identified for you? What did they say about you? The family. Sara broke a piece of barfi in half. That I'm too particular. That I'm too educated. That I read too much and it has given me ideas. She said it lightly, but they both heard the weight of it. All true, presumably. All completely true. Alia smiled. She was close enough that Sara could smell her perfume, something clean and warm, like sandalwood and something else she couldn't name. What would the not particular, not educated, doesn't read Sara want? The one who didn't have ideas? I don't think she would exist, Sara said. I think those things are just me. You can't take them out without taking out me. No, Alia agreed. You can't. A beat of silence. A drum flourish from the musicians. Will you dance? Sara said. She was not entirely sure why she asked. I don't know the steps. I'll show you. She took Alia's hand, which was warm, which she felt in every nerve of her own hand, and led her to the edge of the dancing. She showed her the basic step, facing her. And Alia tried it with her characteristic focus, watching Sara's feet. And then they were dancing clumsily at first, laughing at the clumsiness, and then with more confidence. Moving in the circle of women, hands joined. The lights above them and the music all around. It was dancing. It was perfectly ordinary dancing. Nothing more. Sara thought. I want to remember this forever. She thought. I will remember this forever. 9 weeks into the 3 months. Alia said she had to go to Islamabad for a few days, a meeting with the NGO. Paperwork, administrative necessities. Sara nodded and said of course, and helped her make a list of things to carry, and reminded her about the bus schedule and was entirely practical and fine about all of it. When Alia left on the morning bus, Sara stood at the edge of the road and watched the bus disappear around the mountain curve and felt the loss of her like a physical subtraction, as if someone had turned down the brightness of the day by several degrees. She went home. She taught her classes. She had dinner with her family. Her younger sister Aisha, who was 19 and observant in the sharp way of younger siblings, said at the dinner table, "You seem quiet." "I'm thinking about lesson plans," Sara said. Aisha gave her a look that said she didn't believe a word of this. Alia was gone for 5 days. On the 3rd day, Sara's phone buzzed with a message. "Found this in a bookshop in F6. Thought of you immediately. Can I bring it?" Below the text was a photograph of a book, a beautiful translation of Ghalib, with illustrations. Sara stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed back, "You thought of me in a bookshop. I'm not sure if I should be flattered or offended." The reply came quickly, extremely flattered. "I think of you in most bookshops, and also sometimes in good light." Sara read this. Read it again. Put her phone face down on the bed and lay next to it, and stared at the ceiling with her heart going like a drum. Then she picked it up and typed, "That is a very nice thing to say. I meant it." Came back immediately. "I know," she typed. She put the phone down. She did not sleep very much that night. Alia came back on the 6th day with the book, a bag of dried fruit and nuts from a shop in Islamabad, and a slightly more careful expression than she had left with, as if the distance had given her time to rearrange something. She gave Sara the book at the gate of the Khanum house. "Thank you," Sara said, holding it. It was beautiful, thick cream pages, careful illustrations, the poems in flowing Naskh script. "He wrote about impossible things," Alia said, "and made them beautiful anyway." Sara looked up at her. "Yes," she said. "He did." Alia looked at her steadily for a moment. "I missed you," she said. "Just that. Not more." "I missed you too," Sara said. They went inside and had chai and talked about Islamabad, and everything was ordinary. And everything was not ordinary at all. In the 10th week, a Sunday, They went together to photograph one of the high viewpoints. Above the town, a rocky promontory from which you could see the full sweep of the valley. The river below, the mountains in a full circle. Alia had been wanting to photograph it since she arrived. They kept postponing it for weather or work. They went up in the afternoon, taking their time on the path. It was cold but clear. One of those autumn days when the world seems almost aggressively beautiful, as if beauty itself is trying to make an argument. Alia photographed for a long time, and Sara sat on a flat rock and watched the valley and was content to be exactly where she was. The school, the neighborhood, the marriage conversations, all the weight of ordinary life felt very far below. Up here there was only the wind and the mountains and the light going gold and long. Alia eventually came and sat beside her, camera in her lap. They sat for a while in the quiet that was theirs. "I've been thinking," Alia said. "About what?" A pause. "About what it means to be honest." Sara turned to look at her. Alia was looking at the mountains. "I think," Alia said carefully, "that I have been trying very hard to be responsible. To not say things that can't be unsaid. To not make things harder for you than they already are." Sara's heart was very still. She felt it the way you feel the moment before a storm, the air gone dense and waiting. "I understand that," she said. "I know you do. You've been doing the same." Alia finally looked at her. Her eyes were very direct, very quiet. "But I keep thinking about what I said about things being real even when they don't leave a record. And I think I want you to know. Even if nothing comes of it. Even if it changes nothing practical. I want you to know." Sara waited. "I care about you," Alia said. "More than I've cared about, I care about you in a way that is not ordinary. You know what I mean." It was not a declaration. It was not a request. It was exactly what she had said it was, just a truth offered plainly, with no demand attached. Sara was quiet for a long time. The wind moved through the grass. Far below, a hawk was circling on a thermal effortlessly. "I know," Sara said finally. Her voice was very low. "I know because I feel it too." Alia closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was something in her face that was more relief than joy, the particular release of something that has been held very tightly for a very long time. "I know this can't," Sara started. "I know," Alia said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to tell the truth," Sara said. Yes, they sat with it. The truth that had been in the room with them for 10 weeks, patient and enormous, now finally acknowledged, finally seen. "I've never said it before," Sara said quietly. "To anyone, what I am. What I feel." A pause. "You are the only person who knows." "I know it costs something to say," Alia said. "I know what it costs." "I don't regret it," Sara said. And she meant it completely. Alia reached over and took Sara's hand, not with any intent beyond comfort and solidarity. And Sara felt it as exactly that and as more than that, because of course it was more than that. She did not pull away. She let herself have it, this small, warm, perfect thing sitting on the side of a mountain, with the whole valley below them and the sky going rose and gold. They stayed like that until the cold drove them down. What followed? Those 2 weeks was the happiest and most painful time of Sara's life, which she came to understand are often the same time. She had named it, and having named it, she could not unname it. She could not fold it back into the small, careful shape she had kept it in. It was too large now. It moved through her daily life, constantly coloring the mornings before she saw Alia and the evenings after, and the hours in between when she was teaching or cooking or listening to her mother talk about this nephew of someone's from Lahore who had a government job and was very decent by all accounts. She thought, "I want a life, an actual life. Not performance, not patience, not careful management of other people's expectations. An actual life with actual feeling in it." She knew the thought was dangerous. She held it anyway. She and Alia had not named what was between them beyond that afternoon on the mountain. They did not use words for it, but it was present in every look, every conversation, every easy silence, every moment when Alia reached over to show Sara something on her camera screen and their heads bent together. Sara thought about what a life might look like. Not here, she understood that. Not with her family watching, not in Chitrali, not as things stood. But somewhere, someday, a life where this kind of love was not impossible, was not shameful, was not a wound to be hidden. She had not thought about such a life before because it had felt too theoretical, too far, too much like fiction. But now it had a face. It had a name, she thought. Is this what it feels like to want something that is real? Alia, for her part, was in a state of quiet devastation, not because anything had gone wrong, but because everything was, in its specific way, perfect and the perfection was itself the tragedy. Because Sara was real and this was real and the feeling was as full as anything she had ever known. And in roughly 4 weeks she was getting on a bus to Islamabad and Sara was staying and they both knew it. She thought about Deepening, about how that ending had felt, and this felt both similar and entirely different. With Deepening, the ending was geography, opportunity, the ordinary mechanics of 2 lives moving in different directions. With Sara, the ending was larger and older and heavier. It was not mechanics. It was the whole weight of a world. She photographed more those last weeks than she had the whole time before. She photographed Sara without asking, sometimes a profile, a hand-holding chai, a laugh caught mid-flight. She told herself it was documentary instinct. She knew it was memory-making. She thought, I will carry this with me. I already am, one evening, with 2 weeks left. They sat together in the Khanum garden in the dark, showing a blanket against the cold because neither of them wanted to go inside, and Sara said, Tell me about Istanbul. Tell me all of it. So Alia did. She told her about the apartment near the Bosphorus, about the morning light on the water, about the city at dusk from the Galata Bridge, about the sound of the call to prayer from 100 mosques simultaneously, about the food and the noise and the extraordinary beauty of a place where East and West blur into something all their own. She told her about the photography school, about her professors and her classmates, about Deepening, not with the details of love, but with the details of life shared, of learning and growing in someone's company. Sara listened with complete attention. I want to go, she said. When Alia finished, You should. Maybe someday. She said it carefully, not sad, just measured. I want to go to Istanbul and Istanbul and Istanbul. Alia smiled. All 3 of them. And Paris and Tangier. And Lahore, at least, even just to start. Lahore is wonderful. You would love it. I want to love it. A silence. Sara, Alia said quietly. You could leave Chitrali if you wanted to. Not forever. But for some time, study more. Teach in Lahore or Islamabad. There are programs, scholarships for teachers, fellowships. I know, Sara said. Do you think about it? I think about it. She was quiet for a moment. I think about what it would cost. My family, they need me here, genuinely. It's not just expectation. My mother's health is not strong. My younger siblings are still in school. And I am not as brave as you. You are, Alia said quietly. You're braver than you know. What you carry alone, those people couldn't carry it. Sara looked at the sky. Full of stars, the way mountain town skies are. I carry because there's no other option, she said. There's always an option. There are always more options than we can see from where we're standing. A pause. I'm not saying anything is easy. I'm saying you're not stuck unless you decide you're stuck. Sara thought about this for a long time. What if I'm scared? She said finally. Then you're scared, Alia said simply. And you do it scared. Or you don't do it yet. Or you do something smaller first and then something larger. There's no one right path. You make it sound manageable. I make it sound possible. Which it is. Manageable is a longer project. Sara laughed the embarrassing laugh, and Alia looked at her with the expression Sara had come to know so well. Warm and pleased and a little undone. I don't want you to leave, Sara said. She said it simply, without self-pity, just fact. I know, Alia said. I don't want to go. They sat in that for a while. But you will, Sara said. I will, and I will stay. For now, Alia said. Not forever. The last week came with the particular cruelty of time that has been holding its breath. Suddenly it let go and moved at normal speed again. And each day was a countdown that both of them could feel. They did not spend every moment together. There was still work, the last few visits, the final documentation, the sorting and labeling of months of photographs. There were still Sara's classes to teach, her family's life to participate in. The ordinary daily round that does not pause for grief or leave or love, but the time they did have together was different. Quieter, more present if that was possible. They spoke less about the future and more about the specific immediate moment what the light was doing. What a particular old woman's hands looked like working. What the mountains sounded like in the wind. On the fourth to last day, Alia gave Sara a small envelope. "Open it after I leave," she said. Sara took it. "Is it a letter?" Among other things, Sara turned it over in her hands. "Alia, I know," Alia said. "I know everything you're about to say, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to have it." Sara put the envelope in the inner pocket of her coat next to her heart, which was maybe too symbolic, but she did it anyway. On the third to last day, Sara took Alia to her favorite place, a spot above the town she had never shown anyone. A rocky ledge with a view of the river below and the mountains full circle, where she had come for years when she needed to think. She had thought about showing her many times and held back each time. Now she didn't hold back. "I come here when things are too much," she said, sitting on the flat rock. "What kinds of things?" "The marriage conversations. The feeling of being watched, measured. The feeling that my life is a series of requirements I have to meet." She looked at the river, silver and distant below. "I come here and the mountains are so large and so old and so entirely unconcerned with any of it. And I feel smaller, which is actually a relief." "I understand that completely," Alia said. She was photographing, but gently the view, the river, once Sara's profile when she thought Sara wasn't looking. "You gave me your secret place. I wanted you to have it." Alia lowered the camera. "I'll take care of it. I know you will." On the last full day, they sat in the Khanum garden for a long time after all the practical work was finished, the suitcases mostly packed, the bags organized, the paperwork done. Just sitting, making the most of a resource about to become unavailable. "I need you to know something," Alia said. "Tell me." Coming here, this was supposed to be a work assignment. An important one, a good one, but work. "I did not expect," she stopped. "I did not expect you. I did not expect any of this to be what it became." "Nor did I," Sara said. "You changed something in me. The way I look at what's possible. I look at your life and I see something constrained and difficult and also full. You are so present in it, even carrying what you carry. You are so fully yourself in a context that doesn't even allow yourself to be yourself." I find that she paused. "I find you extraordinary, Sara. I want you to know that." Sara looked at her hands. She was quiet for a moment. "You showed me something too," she said finally. "You showed me that someone could really see what I am and not be frightened, not be disgusted, not treat it like something shameful." She felt the sting at the back of her eyes that she was absolutely not going to permit. "I never knew what that felt like. To be seen and accepted. Just as you are." Alia was very still. "I'll carry that with me," Sara said. "I'll carry it for the rest of my life." "You deserve it," Alia said. "All of it. The whole life. Not the performance of one, the actual thing. I hope you get it." "I think," Sara started. "I think I am a little closer to believing I'm allowed to want it. Because of you." Alia looked at her. The afternoon light was very beautiful. Everything was very beautiful. Sara thought, "I am memorizing this. I am writing it into myself. Can I?" Alia started. "Yes," Sara said. Alia reached over and took Sara's face in her hands very gently, with the same care she used for the embroidery, the same attention she brought to the things she photographed, the things she documented because she believed they mattered, and pressed her lips softly to Sara's forehead. It lasted only a moment. It was nothing dramatic. It was not a story's kiss, but it was real and it was tender. And it was the only kind of love it could be in this place, and time held carefully, offered gently. Not demanding anything in return. Sara pressed her hand over Alia's hand where it rested against her face. "Thank you," Sara said. "No," said Alia. "Thank you." Alia left on a Thursday. The same day she had arrived. The morning was gray and cold. A mist in the valley, the mountains half hidden. Sara walked to the Khanum house at 7. The bus left at 8. There was a small crowd seeing Alia off, the Khanum family. A few neighbors, old Bibi Zainab, who had insisted on coming despite the cold. There was tea and there were embraces and there were promises of emails and return visits and all the warm, ordinary things people say at party nice. Sara stood a little to the side. She'd said her private goodbye the evening before in the garden. This public goodbye was simpler. Alia hugged her last. Keep reading, Alia said, very quietly near her ear. Keep teaching. Keep coming to your mountain. Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are. I'll try, Sara said. Not try, do. Sara laughed quietly. You're giving me assignments on your way out the door. Someone has to. Alia pulled back, looked at her. Her eyes were wet. Sara had not expected that. You know where I am, she said. You have my number. You can call whenever you want. About anything. About nothing. I know, Sara said. Sara, just her name again. All the weight of everything in it. I know, Sara said again. Self-certain? I know. The bus came. There was a general movement of bags and people. Alia got on. The bus moved. Sara watched it go around the mountain curve where it disappeared into the mist. She stood for a while after. In the cold gray morning, her hand in her coat pocket, touching the small envelope she had not yet opened. Then she turned and walked home. Sara opened the envelope that night, alone in her room. After her family had gone to sleep, inside was a photograph and a folded note. The photograph was taken from the high promontory above the town, the viewpoint, where they had gone in the 10th week, where they had held hands and watched the hawk. In the photograph was Sara from behind, sitting on the flat rock, looking at the valley below. The mountains were behind her and around her, and the light was that particular gold that came in the last hour of the afternoon. And she looked like someone who was entirely herself, entirely present, exactly where she was supposed to be. Sara held the photograph. For a long time, she unfolded the note. It was written in Alia's handwriting, slightly slanted. Ink pen, careful, Sara, I don't know how to say this without it sounding like more than I mean it to be. So I'll just say it plainly. Knowing you has been one of the great gifts of my life. Not a small one. A great one. I want you to have this photograph because I think you don't see yourself clearly. I think you see someone hemmed in, constrained, smaller than she should be. I see someone standing in the mountains as if she grew there rooted and alive, and completely herself. You said once that you want to feel like your life is yours. I believe it will be. I believe you are moving toward that, even when it doesn't feel like movement. Even when it feels like standing still, you are the most real person I have met in a very long time. You are extraordinary in ways you don't know. And you deserve a love that doesn't have to hide. A love that can be lived in the full light. I hope you find it. I hope when you find it, you let yourself have it. Your friend, and more than that. In whatever way more than that is allowed to be, Sara folded the note. She held it against her chest. She did not cry, exactly. She sat with it, all the feeling, the gratitude, and the grief, and the stubborn, fragile seed of hope that Alia had planted in her, and she breathed. And she was present with it, the way Alia had taught her. The way the camera teaches, this matters, I'm paying attention. This is real. Winter came to Chitrali. The mountains wore snow. The town contracted inward, the way cold places do. More tea, more indoor time, more family, neighborhood, and the long, slow endurance of dark mornings. Sara taught her classes. She had her dinners. She listened to the marriage conversations, which did not stop. She said gee, Amy, and nothing else, but something had shifted in her. She could feel it, not dramatic, not sudden, more like the way ice begins to change in early spring, molecular and slow. A different relationship to herself. A willingness to look at what she wanted without immediately looking away. She read more. She ordered books online, things she had wanted for years and kept putting off. She read Face with new eyes, or maybe old eyes that had been given permission to see. She wrote in a notebook, nothing organized, just thoughts, questions, observations. The things she'd been accumulating for 24 years with nowhere to put them. She texted Alia sometimes. Not constantly, they were not in constant contact. Both of them too honest about what that might do to the tender, careful thing they were managing. But sometimes. A photograph of the mountains after a snowfall. A passage from a book. Once late at night, I'm thinking about what you said. About options, Alia replied. And? And on considering them, Sara wrote, "Good." Alia wrote back, "In February." Sara applied for a fellowship. She did not tell her family. She researched it quietly over several weeks, a 1-year teaching development fellowship based in Lahore, open to school teachers from KPK and Afeta, offering training, certification, a small stipend, housing in a hostel, and a guaranteed placement back in their home district after the year. It was, as Alia had said, a real option. Not a fantasy. Not a flight from everything. A pathway. She filled out the application over 3 evenings at the kitchen table after her family had gone to bed. She wrote about her teaching, about her girls, about what education meant in a place like Chitrali. She wrote about what she wanted to learn and why. She wrote the truth. She submitted it and then sat back and felt something she identified after a moment as hope. Modest, provisional, real hope. She texted Alia, "I did something." Alia called her immediately. "Tell me," she said. Sara told her. There was a silence on the line, and then Alia said, in the voice she used when she was trying not to be too much, "Sara, that's wonderful. I might not get it." "You'll get it. You don't know that." "I know you." "You'll get it." A pause. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Sara said. And? "Alive," Sara said. "I feel alive." She could hear Alia smiling through the phone. "Good," she said. "That's exactly right." March, the snow began to retreat up the mountains. The valley turned that particular thin green of early spring. Tentative and determined, Sara was called for an interview for the fellowship in Peshawar. She went on the bus alone. For the first time in her adult life, she was accustomed to family travel. Chaperone trips, the collective unit of household movement. Going alone felt enormous. She sat by the window and watched the mountains give way to the plains and felt, for the first time in a long time, the physical sensation of moving. The interview went well. She talked about her students with a passion that was genuine. She was asked about her goals, and she said them plainly: better pedagogy, broader understanding, coming back with more. She was honest and clear and unperformed. On the bus home, she messaged Alia, "I think it went well, Of course it did." Alia replied. She told her mother that evening. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lahore." "For a year, yes, alone. In a hostel with other women teachers. It's a proper program. It's funded. It's a fellowship. It's an honor to be asked to apply." Her mother was quiet for longer. Sara waited. She prepared herself for argument, for the weight of it. For the familiar walls, her mother said, "Your father will say no." "I know," Sara said. "I would like your support." Her mother looked at her, really looked, in the way she rarely did, as if seeing a person rather than a role. "You've changed," she said. "Have I?" "Something is different about you since that photographer was here." It was not accusation. It was observation. Her mother was, Sara had long known, more observant than she allowed herself to be. Sara looked at the table. "She helped me see some things more clearly," she said. It was true. It was everything and nothing. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, to Sara's complete astonishment, she said, "I will talk to your father." Her father said no. Initially, then her mother said things to him that Sara was not present for, behind their closed bedroom door. And the following morning at breakfast, her father said, "Tell me about this fellowship." Sara told him. Carefully, fully, with all the practical details: the housing, the stipend, the certification, the guaranteed return to her district school. She told him it was respected, it was structured. It would make her a better teacher for the girls of Chitrali. She did not say, "It will make me more of a person." She did not say, "I need to see what else exists." She did not say, "A woman I fell in love with told me I am not stuck." And on testing whether she was right, her father was quiet for several days. On the 4th day, he said, "You come back after 1 year." "Yes, Baba." Sara said, "You are not one of these city girls who forgets where she came from." "I am from these mountains," Sara said. "I will always know where I am from." He was quiet another moment. "Your teaching is good work," he said, finally, as if this had been his conclusion all along and a previous conversation had been merely procedural. "Good teachers learn more and then teach better." "That is how it works," Sara nodded. She said nothing else. She did not push her luck. She went to her room and sat on her bed and held her face in her hands and felt, through her palms against her face. Something like the beginning of a new thing. Sara got the fellowship. She went to Lahore in June, 26 hours on a bus. A duffel bag and a backpack, the Ghalib book in her bag. The envelope in the inner pocket of her traveling coat. She stepped off the bus at the envelope in the inner pocket of her traveling coat. Lahore terminal and the city hit her immediately. The noise. The heat, the density of life, the smell of exhaust and food impossibility. She had not known that possibility had a smell, but it did. It smelled like Lahore in June. The hostel was a 3-story building near Gulberg. The other women in the fellowship were from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, from Baluchistan, from Azad Kashmir, from Sindh. 22 women from places all over Pakistan. All teachers, all here to learn and grow and return changed. Sara met them over dinner that first evening and felt something she had not expected, relief. The relief of people who understood, who were doing the same work, who had the same exhausting negotiations with family and expectation and desire behind them. She texted Alia, "I'm here." "I got here." Alia replied immediately, "Tell me everything." Alia came to Lahore in September. They had talked about it carefully, honestly. Alia was based in Islamabad. Lahore was 2 hours away. They had been messaging since Sara arrived, and at some point the conversation became, "I could come for a weekend." "If you want," Sara had said. "Yes, I want." They met at a cafe in Liberty Market, which was near the Nihari restaurant Alia had mentioned in Bibi Zainab's courtyard what felt like many years ago. Sara got there first and was sitting with the chai when Alia walked in. And the feeling of seeing her again was so overwhelming that Sara had to look down at her cup for a moment and compose herself. Then she looked up and Alia was smiling at her, that open, easy smile with nothing complicated in it, except of course everything was complicated in it, and Sara smiled back. "Hello," Alia said. "Hello," Sara said. They hugged properly. The way you hug someone you have missed for months. Sara pressed her face briefly into Alia's shoulder and let herself have it 1 second. "Two, you look different," Alia said. "Sitting down. Do I?" "Lighter, like something lifted. Something did," Sara said. Several things. She told Alia about the fellowship, the women she had met, the teaching she was learning, the classes in curriculum development and child psychology and creative pedagogy, all the ways her understanding of her own work was deepening. She told her about the bookshop she had found and the areas of the city she had explored on Sundays, the food she had eaten, the strangers she had talked to. She told her about the first time she had gone to a cafe alone and sat there for an entire hour reading a book and not apologized for taking up space. Alia listened with complete attention. "You're becoming who you were going to become," she said. "I don't know who that is yet," Sara said. "You're finding out." That's the same thing. They spent the whole day together, the Nihari restaurant, a bookshop, a walk along the canal road in the late afternoon, chai at sunset on a rooftop cave with the city going golden below them. They talked about everything and nothing. They were together and it was complicated and simple and exactly what it was. They did not pretend to be something they weren't. They did not pretend to be something they could fully be. They were what they had always been, themselves, together, in whatever form the world allowed. In the evening, before Alia's bus back to Islamabad, they sat on a bench near the bus stop. Sara, Alia said. "I know," Sara said. "I want to say it clearly once. Not to make anything harder. Just because I think it deserves to be said plainly." "Say it, I love you," Alia said. Simple, direct, quiet. "I know what that means and doesn't mean in our lives. I know all the practical architecture of why. I just want you to hear it said plainly." Without qualification. Sara was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them, indifferent and enormous. "I love you too," she said. "I didn't know I was allowed to say that. But I do." Alia reached over and squeezed her hand once. Not held, just pressed, just contact, just acknowledgement. "I know," she said, "and I know." Sara said. They sat until the bus came. Alia got on. Sara waved and Alia waved from the window, and the bus moved into the enormous ordinary city. Sara sat on the bench for a while longer. A motorcycle went past. A family walked by with shopping bags. 2 children were chasing each other near the bus stop. The world was entirely full of people living their entirely complicated lives, all of them carrying things they couldn't fully put down. Sara felt under the ache of it. A curious and steadfast peace. Sara returned to Chitrali with her fellowship, certificate and a box of books and a clarity about herself that she had not carried before. She went back to her school, her students, her family's house. She made chai for the neighbors and attended her cousin's engagement and was present for all the ordinary requirements of her life. And she was genuinely there. Not performing, present. The marriage conversations did not stop. She navigated them the same way. Amy, whatever you think best, but something in her had changed. Something in her posture or her manner that her mother noticed. Because her mother stopped pushing quite as hard. Not stopped entirely, but softened. Sara thought, I will cross that bridge when I come to it. For now, I am here and I am mine. She started a small reading group at the school, nothing formal. Just some of the older girls who wanted to read beyond the curriculum. They met on Friday afternoons and read things Sara selected. Stories about women, about choices, about the world beyond their valley. She was careful. She was thoughtful. She gave them things that would open doors without knocking down walls they weren't ready to have knocked down. She thought about what she was planting and what it would grow into. She thought about Alia when she did this. She thought, this is what you showed me. This is the lesson. She and Alia were in each other's lives in the way that was possible. Messages, occasional calls, a visit once more when Sara came to Islamabad for a conference in the spring. It was not a love story with a traditional happy ending. It was a love story that had found the shape available to it, and settled into that shape and was finding it enough. Not everything. Not the full life. But enough and real. Sara understood that she might someday have more. She was 26 now, then 27. She understood that the world was larger than Chitrali, that there were cities and places and communities where her life could take a different shape. She did not know when or how. She was not yet ready to leave completely, not yet willing to make the breaks that would need to be made. But she could see the door. She could see it clearly now, where before there had been only wall. Alia had not given her a life. No one could give that. She had given her the knowledge that a life was possible, that wanting one was legitimate, that she was real. Sara was 31 when she left Chitrali for good, not in rupture or scandal, not in drama, in the gradual, negotiated, imperfect way of real lives and opportunity in Lahore. A position at an NGO working in education, a mother who had softened over years into something that looked almost like acceptance. A father who had decided to think of it as Sara moving forward with her work, which was partially true. She rented a small apartment in Lahore with another woman, a colleague. She bought furniture she chose herself. She cooked what she wanted when she wanted. She walked in the city on Fridays and felt the particular freedom of being anonymous in a crowd, free from the weight of being someone's daughter, someone's teacher, someone's candidate for something. She texted Alia on the first night in the apartment, I'm here. I got here? Again. Alia called immediately. They talked for 2 hours. About the apartment, the view, the neighbor who had already introduced himself at the wrong hour. The way Lahore smelled at night, the chai Sara had made in her own kitchen with her own pot. How do you feel? Alia asked. Like myself, Sara said. Like entirely myself. Yes, Alia said, in the voice she used for things that mattered. Yes, that's exactly right. Alia was living in Islamabad. She had a studio. She was working on a long-term project documenting rural women artisans across Pakistan. The work she had started in Chitrali expanded now into a full body of work. It was being published. People were paying attention. They saw each other more often now. Lahore to Islamabad was manageable. They had dinners, walks, long conversations that wandered from photography to politics to books to their families to the state of the world. They had the kind of friendship that is made of love and history and the particular intimacy of having seen each other completely. They had talked about what they were to each other, several times in the honest and imperfect way of real people. They had talked about the gap between what they felt and what was possible, about what they both needed and what the world offered, about the long, slow, uncertain work of building a life that is genuinely yours. It was not a clean story. Feelings do not resolve into clean stories. But it was real and ongoing, and there's one evening, sitting on Alia's apartment floor in Islamabad, with chai going cold between them and 100 photographs spread across the floor for a layout they were working on together. Sara said, I'm glad I didn't give up. Alia looked at her. On what? On all of it. On wanting things. On believing I was allowed to have them. Alia was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you didn't either. You helped with that. Sara met her eyes. You know that. I think you helped with you, Alia said. I just showed up. You showed up in the right place at the right time and you saw me, Sara said. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Alia looked at her with that warm, steady, undone look that Sara had first seen over a cup of chai in a Chitrali sitting room and had been carrying in her chest ever since. Yes, Alia said. You too. There is a photograph on the wall of Sara's apartment in Lahore. It is the photograph Alia took on the mountain above Chitrali. All those years ago, Sara from behind, sitting on the flat rock. The valley below and the mountains all around and the gold afternoon light making everything luminous. Sara looking like someone who grew there, rooted and alive. People who visit the apartment ask about it sometimes. Sara says a friend took it. A photographer friend. She does not say, this was the beginning of understanding that I was real. She does not say, I fell in love with the woman behind the camera in a way that was impossible and also, in the ways that mattered, not impossible at all. She does not say, this photograph is the reason I learned to stop hiding from my own life. She says, a friend took it. A photographer friend, and then she makes them chai and they talk about other things. And in the corner of her eye, the photograph is always there, that girl on the mountain. Surrounded by what could overwhelm her, entirely unoverwhelmable. What is the love that cannot be named? It is not lesser for being unnamed. It is not less real for being inconvenient. It does not disappear because the world has not made room for it. It simply waits patient as mountains. For the space that can hold it, and it makes that space, slowly, inch by inch. By being persistent and real and undenied. Sara learned this. She carried Alia into her future the way you carry things that have changed. You not as weight but as ground. As foundation. The stone that makes standing possible. She found her way to a life that was hers. She was afraid. And she did it afraid. She lost things. And she carried what she lost with dignity. She loved in the full complicated human way, not perfectly. Not without pain, not without the grief of what could not be, and she loved without apology. She became. As Alia had said she would. Entirely herself. Faze wrote, Tumau, come to me. Come to me, which is what we say to the things we love, which is what we say to the life we want, which is what we say to ourselves when we are trying to be brave enough to actually live. Come, you are allowed here. This is real. You are real. Sara knows this now. She has always known it. She just needed once for someone else to know it too.
If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment about your own love story. Subscribe for more true lesbian love stories. Share with someone who needs to hear this today. Thank you.